Yo, what's up? Time for another tutorial. This one is the super stringy combo. It's got trichetras, it's got slacks, it's got whips, it's got triangles, it's got all sorts of stuff. Um, it's definitely a personal favorite of mine. It's got a lot of weird elements, and it's got a common like whipping theme. This trick is incredibly demanding of your tension on your string. Make sure that you got your string tension perfect. There's a lot of really hard elements in this one, but I really feel like once you get it all together and you get it nice and clean, it looks amazing. It feels fun to do, and yeah, I love it. You can do try catches with it too. So, fuck yeah. Anyway, check it out. Here it is. Super stringy combo. A combo full of slacks. Make sure you got your tension right. That's going to help you out the most throughout this entire trick. Having good tension. We're going to start in a trapeze mount. We're going to make a circular motion with our anchor arm, and that's going to create this plume of slack that's going to sit over the top of our anchor. As it's coming around, we're going to try and land it into the gap of the yo-yo. You'll notice that the yo-yo, once I'm in the trapeze, I'm pinching the segment that's coming from the yo-yo and going to my freehand, so that way it locks this segment right in here, locks it in at this distance and this length, so that way I got all the room that I need to bring my slack around and catch it in the yo-yo. So we'll bring it around. Once you hit and you've locked your slack in, you can drop that off, and then we are in our static spin mount. You'll do your static spin just by opening and closing your hand, and this will never wrap around, so you can do as many of these as you want. I use these to hit a try-catcher pattern, just to get somebody's attention. A static spin is definitely not as cool as a try-catcher. Ask anybody. Anyway, once we're here and we're doing our static spin, when we come back around, we're going to be hitting the back of the mount, the very back string, and we're going to be cutting that with our freehand. From this point, we're going to be taking our fingers on our anchor, and we're going to be turning them, instead of away from us, we're going to be turning them towards our freehand. What that's going to do is going to allow us to undercut these two strings, but we only want to land the yo-yo on this section of string coming off the back. So we'll turn our hand, we'll make that undercut, and now we have this mount where you have an extra slack around your freehand pointer finger. From here, we're going to be dropping the slack off our pointer. It's going to let this slack kind of hang down on our wrist, and at the same time, you can see that I'm pinching this section of string with my thumb against my hand to keep my trapeze right at that length right here. So once you drop the slack off, so we're going to drop the slack off, and we're going to turn our throw hand, our anchor hand, palm down to let the slack rest over the top of our free wrist. From here, we're coming back the same direction we came by turning our wrist back the other direction, and you're going to land that slack into the yo-yo with the string section that's closest to you, the one that's draping over the back of your wrist, not the section that's tied to your anchor. So that's going to come in just like that. So we got our mount, our static spin, our first undercut, turning our hand, second undercut, dropping the slack, hitting the back of the wrist, bringing the slack back down, and now we're in this mount right here. What we're gonna do with this mount is we're gonna pop it up, and instead of landing back on the string like that, we're gonna miss the string away from us towards the outside. From there, we're going to take the segment of string from the yo-yo to our freehand, and we're gonna undercut it with our anchor and try and land it right on there. It's kind of hard to do an undercut with like an entire hand, so it might feel weird the first couple times you do it, but you'll get pretty consistent at it with just a little bit of practice. So we're doing our pop up, drop forward, undercut, and trying to land it on that segment right there. So turning our hand, undercut, dropping the slack, bringing the slack back, pop up, miss on the outside, and then undercutting that single string to land it right here. From here, we're kind of back to one of our previous steps where we're turning our fingers, instead of pointing them out on our anchor hand, we're pointing them towards our free hand, undercutting again and getting the same formation. Now, instead of dropping the slack and hitting the back of the wrist, what we're going to be doing is dropping the slack and completely turning our hand to create like an iron whip type of motion right there. So undercut the two strings, you have the slack mount, we're dropping the loop, and at the same time we're doing an iron whip motion. It's going to put us in a Mach 5 mount, except for instead of our finger being like that, you know, we're like this, almost in like a wheel plane. We're going to dismount this by popping the yo-yo up by pulling our arms apart, and we're going to dismount it by crossing our arms while it's in the air. And that's going to be, your anchor is going to be over your free hand when you cross them. That's the whip. We're in the Mach 5, popping it up and crossing our arms. Now that we're at the full extended, this is where we're going to hit our whip. The whip is going to be the hardest part about this trick. If you don't know whips, this is going to... My first whip took me 3 weeks to learn, but this is how you whip. You're going to be turning the 3 fingers on your anchor hand inwards. We're going to be popping the yo-yo up to around waist height, and as you're popping it up, you're also going to be making this motion with your hand, and that's going to bring the slack around, and you're going to try and land the slack into the yo-yo just like that there. So, and it's going to end out just like that. The biggest part about the whip is you want the motion of pulling the yo-yo up to the right height and the motion of the whip to be correct, but they are also the same motion. So when you might get the yo-yo up to the right height, but it won't make the whip, and you might get a good whip segment, but it's just not the right height. You just kind of play around with it and feel for it. Alright, from our whip, once we land it, it should look something like this. What we're going to do is we're going to take our thumb and we're going to pinch this segment of string to our anchor hand pointer finger. Once this segment is pinched, we're pushing the yo-yo away from us, and that will reject the slack off of the mount of the yo-yo. And what we're going to do with that rejection is we're going to use that energy to kind of push the rejection. It's going to be going over our anchor hand. We're going to be crossing our free hand underneath, catching that slack and slapping it back. So right here, we're going to push the yo-yo forward and use your momentum here to get this slack over the top, cross your arms, and get ready to slap it back. When you're pushing this back, it's gonna drop and drape, and you're gonna want to catch that string into the gap just like that. This is you're gonna want to have perfect tension on this. If you don't have perfect tension, you're just gonna have to go a lot faster. So pop it up, hit the slap back, and it's gonna mount the yo-yo right there. And what you'll realize now is you are in a 1.5 mount. So from this 1.5 mount, we're gonna rotate the yo-yo around. As it's coming around, we're gonna grab that single string in the back with our thumb, pop the yo-yo out. We're gonna pinch with our anchor hand by curling our pointer finger in, and you're gonna take, the yo-yo should be going in this motion, so you're gonna continue that motion and drape the yo-yo over your free hand. Now you're gonna wanna pinch this section of string pretty tight. We're gonna undermount the yo-yo and drop the slack off our thumb. So now we have this slack, and we have our undermount on our yo-yo. The whole formation is going to be spinning the same way the undermount dismounts. And basically what we're going to be doing is moving the slack around like that, and we're going to be moving the yo-yo around like that. When you put the two together, so right here, when you put the two together, it should look something just like that. When this whip comes around, you're gonna wanna make sure that first you're pinching the string so you can land the yo-yo on that segment. And as this whip's coming around, you're gonna wanna whip the string furthest away from you into the gap. Now you're back in a Mach 5 mount. This time we're just gonna suicide it. That means we're gonna rotate the entire mount around our pointer finger. We're gonna pinch this section. We're gonna let go of the section in our free hand, and then try and re-catch that loop as it comes around. And always make sure you got the right tension on your yo-yo. It's just gonna make all the slacks and all the maneuvers a lot easier. So as this is coming around, now we're in our Mach 5 mount, and this is where we go for our suicide. It always helps to kind of open up that hole before you do your suicide there. Just open that up nice and wide, flick it around. The string might be a little bit too used to get a nice big plume on there. There we go. And just try and insert your finger into that loop, trying to catch that suicide. Realize now we're back in a Mach 5 mount. We're going to dismount this mount the same way we dismounted the last Mach 5. We're going to pull our hands apart, popping the yo-yo up in the air and crossing our arms. This time the anchor's over the free. I think it's the same way. And as you're undoing this Mach 5 mount, you'll end up in this particular segment, and we're going to go straight into the sky bind. You can do that by uncrossing your arms, and what we're going to be doing is pulling up, and we're going to hit the yo-yo into this string as it's headed in an upward direction. That's going to hit our bind. The reason I do this bind is from the dismount of the Mach 5 to the bind. You can do them together in a nice smooth single motion, and I feel like it's really got a lot of pop to it. So it's Mach 5, popping up, crossing the arms, and then it's just pulling up on You're pulling your hands apart, but you also want to be sending the yo-yo straight up at the same time, just into that string segment, so that way it hits that bind, it hits your response system, and it comes back to your hand there. Good luck. That's a super stringy combo. These ones we're starting to get into my more difficult ones, so hope y'all enjoyed it.